On behalf of the Durham Agricultural Commission, I invite you to watch a new series that we've just started that focuses on farms and gardens and the working landscape of Durham and some surrounding towns. And we're going to have this series run through the year, looking at different things that are happening a bit behind the scenes in your neighborhoods. So we invite you to tune in every month and see what we've been up to. Our first video for this new series takes you to Lee and Tuckaway Farm, farmed by the Cox family. They're growing a variety of products year-round, much of which is served in our school district lunchrooms.
Yeah, my wife and I bought part of the land that we have now back 45 years ago. We've been farming organic since day one. When I was in high school, I met some people that were involved in organic farming. I ended up going to Cornell University back in the 60s when this was not being taught. Often in a greenhouse you're growing on tables in beds. And the high tunnel, these were the two that we have here were purchased through the NRC, Natural Resource Conservation Service programs. And they stipulated that you have to be growing in the ground, not in potting soil in benches, and that you did not provide heat, that you were not heating the place using energy and stuff to heat. The school district was very interested in local foods and organic foods, the problems with pesticides and herbicides, and the sustainability group, which was formed, must be 5 or 6 years ago. I was asked to be on that committee and have served on it since then. And that's how I originally got, one of the original connections with the school was through that. Though our children attended the Oyster River School District, and our one daughter, two daughters I think, grade school would take asparagus from the farm and take it in for the teachers who wanted it. We weren't selling to the school district at that time. We've been providing some produce. We have a gill feather turnip, which is a very sweet turnip, which is an heirloom variety that we've had in the school. We've sold potatoes, winter squash, tomatoes and peppers, and Swiss chard and some other greens.
This will go right to the store. I did not plant spinach in quantity to do more than really provide for our store CSA members and people coming through to shop retail at the store. And to think about doing greens for the school district is a big deal because of how labor intensive greens can be. So to be able to provide for them in the quantity that they need. I would love to find a way to be part of that. I think the Asian greens, pak choi, cabbage, there's broccoli we've done, kale, collards. There's so much that we could be doing, and the nutrition is so much greater if it's going from here to Moheramet than the other sources of produce.
Things have gotten a little more complicated over the last few years. Their food program, they have USDA products that are donated to the school, and to be on that program they have certain guidelines or requirements that they have on procurement. They're requiring having things to have to go out for bid, that you cannot specify local. You can't use the term local, so they're trying to get around, what things can be worked with that, which can put the small farmer, particularly if our overhead is much higher on a lot of things, and a lot of the regulations are geared for big operations that little guys can't afford to do. So in some ways we're having to overcome those, which is a whole thing in agriculture in New England particularly.
The next farm we visit is near and dear to my heart because it's my family farm on Bennett Road, or I should say my family's farm on Bennett Road, and we've been raising sheep there for a number of years, and Phil Kincaid stopped by in January as we were getting ready for lambs to be born for this new lambing season. So in January we're typically starting to watch for the arrival of lambs. Most of these ewes went in with a ram the middle of August. And for most sheep, at least in our flock,
the gestation is about 147 days. So it's almost pretty exact in that respect. If I see them being bred, I can count out 147 days, and those lambs will probably be born within that day. It's amazing, I think, that it can be so scheduled like that. We didn't necessarily see any of the rams breeding these ewes this year. We didn't use what's called a marking harness, which enables us to know when they were bred. So we're kind of playing a little bit of a game here to see who's going to go first. And the things we look for there are udders, where they're producing milk for the lambs. Also, they start to have their own kind of specific maternity behavior, just like maybe human moms who are in that last month. They go off by themselves. They really just want to rest. They're not necessarily joining the flock. We watch them. They start to paw the ground as they're looking for a place to rest. So once we start seeing some of those signs, like pawing the ground, getting up and getting down, sometimes there's grunting, we know labor is starting. And so what happens after that is we give them their own special private birthing room. We move them over to another part of the barn, and we put them in what's called a lambing jug. And it's just a small pen where they can be by themselves. And after the lambs are born, and the lambs can bond and nurse from their mother, and they can also not be trampled by the larger flock. Lambs get up typically and move around within 15 or 20 minutes of birth. They're nursing, they're walking, but they're still a bit unsteady. And so to have them in a space set aside from the rest of the flock, we won't have to worry about them being stepped on. The lambing toolkit, we have a scale and a sling. So we put the newborn lamb in here. Their front feet go through here, and then we quickly weigh them. And every shepherd you talk to has different things and things they do and don't do. We have some vitamins there, just kind of early strength. It's really almost like sugar, and it has some fat and some extra vitamins in there. And then we also have a bottle in case we need to nurse a lamb that's not getting on to the mom early enough. So if for some reason the ewe is weak and is not able to nurse, we're going to increase the chances of survival of her lambs by providing her with either some colostrum or some milk, especially in those cold nights where we just need to get something in their tummy. So if it's really, really bitter cold, we have that heating lamp there, that orange lamp that we set up. Typically, it has to be really bitter cold for us to use that in the beginning. And that's going to just give those lambs at the first few hours of life a little bit more warmth. Their body temperature is 102 degrees normally, so they're burning, they're much warmer than we are. They have this great insulating fleece, and then they're also ruminants, which means they are, digesting cud all the time. And those, to me, are almost like little furnace systems in their stomach. So it can be very cold outside, and you can come down into this barn and the water's not frozen, and they're resting comfortably chewing cud. So for me, the challenge is keeping them cool in the summer much more than keeping them warm in the winter. That's for sure.
Mild winter here this year in Durham, but that doesn't stop people from thinking about the summer and getting ready with their gardens. And so 2 members of the Agricultural Commission are showing us how they're getting ready for spring and summer. We first stop with the Bebbington family as they plan their summer garden in downtown Durham, and then we step inside the lovely home of Ellen Korelitz, and she shows us how she gets ready for her garden planning.
Well, for us, the garden is a hobby, and my garden is, really a chance for me to play with my kids more than anything else. My planning process basically consists of asking the kids, what do you want to grow this year? And pretty much whatever they decide is fine with me. And every year they come up with something new, and every year we usually try something new, and we see what comes out of it. But for us, it's a nice little family activity we can do together.
Well, what I like about gardening is pretty much just planting like foods or corn or pumpkins with the whole family, and then kind of like my reward, like eating or carving jack-o'-lanterns or eating watermelon or whatever I'm planting.
So what do you like best about our garden?
Picking peas.
Picking peas. What else do you like to pick out there?
Blueberries.
Blueberries, yeah.
Eva, what would you like?
What do you want to grow this year?
Watermelon.
Watermelons.
Watermelons?
Okay. And what else?
Is there a way I could grow like
Corn. And you want some peas, right? Because you love peas. We got going a few years ago on what my son called an Indian garden. He learned about it in school, you know, that the Native Americans grew corn and beans and squash together. So that was really the first garden we all planned together. Watermelons. Right? That was the first thing both of you guys wanted. So pages 17 and 18. First thing we're going to choose is what color. They have ones that are yellow inside and ones that are pink inside.
Pink inside.
Pink inside, all right. Then the next thing we got to pick is, because we live in the far north, we got to pick one that has a short season. So this is it. Doesn't look like much right now, but we've got about 10 by 20 here right next to my driveway. It gets full sun. It's the best place in the yard for the garden. And we got 2 feet of snow on it right now, but this is where all the magic will start happening in April and May.
One of my favorite things to do in January is to plan my garden for the spring. It's just such a nice thing to do when it's cold outside, to be thinking about all the growing things. And so usually I start out looking at last year's plan, because one of the things I want to be careful about is not planting things in the same place, because it's important not to deplete the soil. Certain plants use certain kinds of nutrients, and if you keep planting them in the same place, then pretty soon your soil's not very good anymore. So I start out by looking at where I planted the tomatoes and try to move things around so that I have things in different places. And I really like to look at these organic seed catalogs. I have like 3 or 4 of them here, and they all have similar things, but they all address these things in different ways, and they're just a lot of fun. But then some of the other catalogs have the way they set out information about germination times and dates to maturity from the time you plant the seed to when you can harvest. All that information is important to me when I'm trying to choose seeds, because it will determine how big my harvest is and whether I can plant more than one planting of a vegetable during the season. I have some favorite things that I plant over and over again, but every year I try to plant something different. Last year I tried Asian greens, and this year I'm not exactly sure what my new thing will be, but I have a lot of things to look at. So anyone who thinks gardening begins in the spring and ends in the fall is missing the best part of the year. For gardening begins in January with the dream.
The Durham Agricultural Commission thanks you for watching these videos today. We're having a lot of fun pulling them together for you and for us, actually. And we're very grateful to Phil Kincaid, Durham resident, who's been willing to take on this videographer job. And we'll have lots more to share with you in the months ahead on farms and gardens in town, on campus, and who knows where. So stay tuned.